Hey there guys, welcome to my retrospective of the entire Mass Effect series, minus Andromeda. Andromeda has not come out yet, so needless to say, I can't give you a retrospective about a game that's not even released. I mean, I gotta beat it first. But this is Mass Effects 1, 2, and 3. I just recently beat 3, and I want to sort of talk about the series as a whole, and really just probably gush for a while, because I really love Mass Effects 1 and 2. And by talking about how much I love 1 and 2, I think those of you that haven't played it, or those of you that have, will understand my deep disappointment in Mass Effect 3. Despite the fact that Mass Effect 3, in all honesty, isn't a terrible game. You know, if judged by itself, it would be a pretty damn good game, but it's a sequel. You can't necessarily judge it by itself. You have to look at how it compares to the other games of the series, and the answer is not well. So, what we are ultimately looking at in terms of the Mass Effect series. We'll talk about the games one at a time, and then, like I said, we'll get to 3. I know I want to vent about 3, but I'll refrain. So, Mass Effect 1. Mass Effect 1 has the greatest plot in the series, as far as I'm concerned. It accomplishes probably the hardest task of the series as well, which is orientating the player to the entire world. There's tons of codexes you get that just go into a huge amount of galactic history that's amazing. You find out about all these different races and the way that they interact and the way that the way that their culture is set up. You'll find out about a race that communicates its emotions primarily through scent, but other members of other races don't have the training or background to be able to distinguish which scent means what. And so whenever they're talking to a member of another race, they will just outright, tell you what expression or what inclination they are speaking with. So they'll be like, sarcasm, that's really interesting, mild excitement, because they don't the way that their language works, they just extract different scents in order to give their the way they, instead of changing their inflections. And it's so many minor details like that. They introduce you to a whole galaxy and an entire history. They just do so much in order to make everything make so much sense. And they just does a fantastic job. You learn about the major races. I'll be honest, there are some races that get more love than others. It's funny how much you end up knowing about the Asari and the Turian, and the Solarians, but yet other races, I know later in Mass Effect 3, the Batarians end up getting wiped out very early on, and I was suddenly struck with, I don't even know what the Batarians are even about. I've seen them a few times, but it's like, that was one race that there was probably information, but they didn't really leave an impression upon me. Whereas the Krogan and the Solarians, I knew quite a bit about. They really, really, really made me, understand what their particular race was about, their history, and all of that. This one also does a great job in really giving you impactful decisions to make. Almost every major mission, you end up having to make a very impactful choice. You end up having to make a real, are you going to wipe out this species or not? Knowing that in the past they've damn near destroyed the Empire. But they say that, that they've been, influenced and, they won't do that again. Do you believe them? Not believing them will wipe out a whole race. Believing them could put the galaxy in jeopardy. There's no right answer to that. And there's tons of stuff about that. Every single mission, you end up with a lot of very significant choices. This planet is under siege. Do you go after the political elite in order to, cause the planet to be able to recover faster once you hold off the army? Or do you focus on population centers, who the individual members probably will... If you lose the political elite, you're going to have a situation of turmoil and unrest as the people vie for power once you deal with the situation. But if you don't focus on the population centers, then you're going to lose tens of thousands as many people. So do you value life as a whole, or do you value stability? And again, no right answer to that. So they do a really, really good job with that. They do a great job introducing the galaxy. They do a great job. And the villain of the first Mass Effect is absolutely astounding. The villain is Saren. who is someone who, in actuality, is a lot like you. It introduces you to the Reapers and the idea of indoctrination, and how indoctrination is super subtle. That just as you spend more and more time around the Reapers, they will just slowly shift the way that you think, and you won't realize it's happening. You'll just, things that you thought that you would have initially rejected seem to make more and more and more sense. So it's not like brainwashing necessarily. Well, the Reapers can brainwash you, but much more typically they will just slowly introduce deviant thoughts into your processes until you will be led to conclude whatever they want. But because it's not actual brainwashing, you'll still be effective. The big problem with brainwashing is that it ends up kind of overriding the way that you think about things, instead of causing you to actively, if it overrides part of your mental capacity, you will end up being less effective at whatever you do, because they're having to actually suppress a lot of your thoughts, and so you can't do the job as effectively. So, it's just, I know I'm just rambling here, but it's just, the first Mass Effect is so well put together. It does have its problems. The planetary exploration is awful. I mean, I'll be honest, you end up on like a little dune buggy with a tank turret attached to it. And assaulting bases and such is fun. And, going around, taking out the base defenses, avoiding shots, that is very, that was, it looked like crap because this is a game from a long time ago, but it was still interesting to do. But the problem is, if you're just exploring a planet, the planets are boring as hell. Because they're just like endless sand dunes going on, or rocks, or there's no, they didn't try and do, it's not like exploring Xenoblade Chronicles X, where they've done a huge amount of effort into, making this planet feel vibrant and alive. It just feels like a dead moon crater thing. And that's really sad. I don't like that. And that is why in later games they stopped doing it that way, and I certainly understand that. The characters in Mass Effect are also really, I mean, there are some characters I don't like as much. I don't think I was ever a huge fan of Garrus, which is sad because he shows up in every buddy game. I also, a lot of people just ranted and raved and talked about how great Tali was. I knew who Tali was before I ever played Mass Effect, and I didn't think she was all that great. I was kind of like, well, okay, this character is just sort of dull. She's got a somewhat interesting story, but I don't know why she gets so much love and attention. Liara is a profoundly more interesting character than Tali, so I didn't really get that. But Mass Effect 1 does have Rex. It has Liara. So it's got some really, really good people. It's also got, it's weird for some reason, I guess this is again because of the kind of game it is, the human associate characters you have in Mass Effect 1 are by far the most boring characters that you have. And I think that's why actually midway through the game it makes you pick one of the two humans to sacrifice, because they're just thoroughly not nice people and not interesting. It's really sad. And it's actually a little bit sad. I actually picked the wrong one to die, because I made a decision. It was basically, do you go back to this person who's at the shuttle, or do you go over here and get this person who's at the radio? And I was like, well, if I don't get the shuttle, I'm not going to be able to get off at all. So I didn't actually realize that was a choice of who dies. I was just like, well, I need the shuttle. Whoops. But, just... It gives you the history. It talks about, galactic civilization that's going back, tens of thousands of years. I know I'm just sitting here rambling, and I'm sorry. I just really, really like Mass Effect, you guys. The freaking, the Paragon system, which granted is in all three games, but it is such a breath of fresh air. The Paragon system basically boils down to, when you play Mass Effect, you are never a evil person, all right? The Paragon system is basically a decision between, are you going to be a decent person and do the upright, morally correct thing, or are you going to be Batman? Batman is going to get the job done, but he's willing to break some faces to do it. And that's kind of like, so you end up with a Paragon or Renegade. But the thing is, the Renegade system isn't the evil system. There's so many games that have like a good and evil system, and if you do a good act, it lowers your evil score, and if you do an evil act, it lowers your good score. Here, you can have points in both Paragon and Renegade. It's just, whichever one you do more often tends to be the side you're on. And unfortunately, you do kind of end up having to pick one. Because as the game continues, very, very, very frequently, options will only show up if you've gotten to a certain point in your Paragon or your Renegade. But, unlike most things, it's not quite so clear-cut. You can sort of do both to a certain degree. Which I really thought was a good system. It's a system they're not bringing back from Andromeda. And I do understand the reasons. They kind of explained to it that ultimately, by the time we got to the third game, everyone just picked the Paragon or the Renegade option every single time, because there was no real way to design around that. So, and I get that, but I still thought it was way better than the good and evil systems we normally see, and Mass Effect started that. And it was fantabuloso. Super, super happy with the Paragon and Renegade system. The final boss was great. Especially because you had the option to, kind of reason with Saren and make him see the error of his ways, and if you did that, he would actually choose to cure his indoctrination by committing suicide, which is weird. You have a game where doing really well causes someone to commit suicide, but actually, given the way... I feel like the Mass Effect series approaches the game from a fundamentally more mature point than other series do. It's willing to talk about some of the really, really, really kind of topics you don't talk about a lot in other games. And it just handled the entire idea of there being galactic civilizations with a lot more maturity than I'm used to. So, I thought Mass Effect was a fantastic start. I thought it was a damn near perfect game when I played it. The problems it had, like I said, the space exploration section was not the best. I also was absolutely not at all impressed with, a lot of the combat was unrefined. And a lot of people hated the fact that your guns could overheat. They didn't have ammo, they could just overheat. I actually really liked that. But I will say that as a whole, combat wasn't as satisfying in Mass Effect as it later became, but I sure didn't think that was a weakness when I played Mass Effect. I did not notice that the combat wasn't very good. It's just that as I played the other games where they further refined the combat, I did have to be like, okay, you know what, yeah, that combat was better than what it has been previously. So, there, and also, just because of the technology at the time, it feels... I don't know the exact release dates, but I feel like they made Mass Effect and they waited several years, and Mass Effect 2 came out under a new engine, and Mass Effect 3 came out almost immediately afterward. So Mass Effect 2 and 3 both look absolutely gorgeous, but Mass Effect just looks like crap by comparison, just because... But again, that's not the problem with Mass Effect 1. I can't blame it for coming out earlier than the other two. I mean, that's stupid. I really feel like when they made it, they weren't expecting it to be the absolutely colossal hit that it was, so it didn't have just absolutely gobs of extra money poured into it, and then when it became so successful, then they were able to say, okay, yeah, we've got a winner here. And so the second and third one had a lot more production value, but like I said, I really like the plot of Mass Effect 1. It is the most cohesive plot. Oh, the one other problem in Mass Effect, I kind of talked about this a little bit before. Realistically, the person you play is very, very, very narrowly defined. You're going to play a person that's in the Alliance military, that believes in the Alliance military, and it's like, you don't really have an option of playing a bad character or a morally questionable character. All of your decisions in Mass Effect 1 are decisions that are legitimately, there's no right answer. But if you wanted to be evil in Mass Effect 1, you kind of can't be to a certain degree. It does very rigidly define what kind of Shepard you are. Which is something they address in Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 has a lot more nuance than Mass Effect 1. It starts off with you being killed in action and put back together by a group of effectively terrorists known as Cerberus. Cerberus is very, very fed up with the fact that the Alliance Navy is doing, or not really the Alliance Navy, the Council is doing a whole lot of nothing in regards to a bunch of human settlements that have just mysteriously gone missing. And because of that, and what they want you to do about it is they're like, look, you are a massively hotshot individual, we saved your life, can you please save humanity? And you have a very difficult time arguing with that, but it puts you into a lot more of a gray area in terms of where you are in the Mass Effect universe, because you are effectively helping a terrorist cell at this point. In the past, they've been like, you know what humanity really needs? food. So we're going to steal food from this other galactic civilization because fuck them. Give it to the humans. They'll do things like, sabotage a environmental plant because it produces things that this other race needs to survive on this planet. Because if the other race dies off, the humans will have an easier time. So it's like they're very, very pro-humanity, but they're also very, very anti-every other race in the galaxy. However, you aren't really required to buy into that mindset, but they are giving you the resources in order to save humanity and deal with this threat that the Council is not really willing to deal with. So it's a lot more of a morally gray area in Mass Effect 2. I really like that. I like Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls series always starts you off in prison. And the reason is prison is one of the few areas that you can start a game in that makes no assumptions as to what kind of a person would, you can have an asshole in prison, you can have a murderer in prison, you can have a rapist in prison, you can also have an innocent man in prison, you can have someone who, may have done some bad things, but is actually innocent of the crimes he's accused of. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, even though he may not be anyone can end up in prison. Very, very easily. And so, I like the ability that, unlike the first one where you are this outstanding soldier that's done all these great things, now it's sort of like, okay, well, who do you want to be? We're gonna put you in a situation that kind of allows any type of character to be in that situation. And it's fantastic. I really liked the moral grayness of Mass Effect 2. I also really like... Mass Effect 2 also had the best pacing on the Mass Effect games. Mass Effect 1 is basically like, oh, okay, the Council says go here, so we went here. And then the next mission objective was to go here. Which, the great strength of the Mass Effect series for me has always been exploration. Going out, there's a galaxy, let's go look for it, let's go find it, let's go see what we can see. It was, that was always the thing about Mass Effect that I loved the most. And so, Mass Effect 1 just felt very led by the nose-ish. It always just pointed out, here's your next objective! Mass Effect 2's plot is that, hey, there's this group of people that human settlements just keep randomly disappearing. However, we need more information before we can figure out what to do about it. All we know is they're disappearing, and so there's a lot of the game where it's just sort of like, we don't have any leads. Go out there and see what you can find, type of thing. And so you are just given a free rein to go around the galaxy and explore. And as you go around, you do find other members that will join you, and it's kind of awesome. But you just felt very, very liberated and free, and you could do whatever you wanted to. You could go wherever you wanted to go. It wasn't... Before, you had to almost just, intentionally disregard the orders of the Council to really get everything you need out of Mass Effect 1. And with Mass Effect 2, it was much more of a situation of your actual orders are just to explore and look around. So do that. Mass Effect 2 also has the absolute best characters of the Mass Effect series. Like, I talked about before how I liked Liara and Rex out of Mass Effect 1. I was talking about how I didn't really understand why people were so obsessed about Tali. When I played Mass Effect 2, I understand why people were obsessed about Tali. Honestly, I count Tali as a Mass Effect 2 character, because in Mass Effect 1, her character was kind of dull and boring. She was kind of the same thing the whole way through. Mass Effect 2, you really, really start to see who Tali is. You start to see some of her values get questioned, and you start to see her having to make difficult decisions. You get more of an idea of how the Quarians really work. You also run into Legion, who really starts making you question your assumptions of how the Geth worked. Legion, Tali, great characters. Grunt, Morden, fantastic characters. Jack. So many characters in Mass Effect 2 I just absolutely love. And again, this is not to insult or in any way undermine Mass Effect 1. I still love Rex. I still like Liara. But at the end of the day, Mass Effect 2 has more characters, and I like almost all of them. There's not a character in Mass Effect 2 that I hate, and a lot of my favorite characters in the series are from Mass Effect 2. So, the characterization was fantastic. The just mood of the game was what a Mass Effect game should be, in my opinion. Mass Effect 1 wasn't bad, Mass Effect 2 just fucking nailed it. And then, oh my god, the ending of Mass Effect 2 is the perfect ending. It's, okay, almost. The final boss is jack shit. But what happens is that you're just going through, as you're going through and you're looking into this stuff, eventually you will catch the attention of the main enemy. They're called the Collectors. And they will attack your ship. And there's no real warning this is about to happen. It's just like after you finish this mission, the final mission hits you. And you have the choice to back out, but it's like, if you run to that before you're completely ready, then you will have to make a decision between your allies and your crew. Because your crew get abducted, and if you don't go help them right away, they will get killed. But if you're not like ready, then some of your allies will die in the final mission. It's a great, 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 great thing. And of course, once you do it once, then, you know, on subsequent playthroughs, you'll kind of have an idea of when that's going to happen and be able to make sure you're actually ready beforehand. And thankfully, the stream did make sure I was ready. I only lost 2 people in the final mission, but it was still just very, very, very satisfying. I've also got to say that unlike Mass Effect 1, some of the human allies you have in Mass Effect 2 are actually really good allies. I didn't really like Miranda, but I respected her as a character. She was an interesting character. I didn't, you know... I also... She's DLC, but Kasumi is a great character. And frankly, her, like, side mission is one of the best side missions in the game. I thoroughly, thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed that. They also have loyalty missions, which do so much more to let you know about the people that you're with than anything in Mass Effect 1. Mass Effect 1, you had some dialogue trees with them. As you kept talking to them, you'd find out more about them. But in this one, as you kept talking to them, eventually they would have a problem. There'd be something going on, and they'd be like, hey, can you please help me with this? And if you said yes, then awesome! You got to help them, and it was really cool. If not, then they would end up not being as loyal to you, and they had a chance of dying in the last mission. Or just kind of being like, well, screw you, and just leaving in the last mission. One of the two. You know, the last mission is called Suicide Mission. And it's very possible and probable that you will end up losing people in the Suicide Mission. That's why it's called that. So, I found the characterization to be dead on, and I found the, like, mood of the game to be really, really good in Mass Effect 2. I thought it was fan-flippin-tastic. And I really liked, you know, the duality of working for a terrorist organization, but because they were the only ones that would actually try and help people that I wanted to help. The only big problem Mass Effect 2 suffers from, like I said, the final boss is stupid. The final boss is just a big machine that looks like a person. You know, after the absolute brilliance that was Saren in Mass Effect 1, it just seemed lazy and poorly done. I didn't care for it. And then that brings us to Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 3 has a couple of problems with it right from the get-go. Number one, the opening of Mass Effect 3 is that you're sitting on Earth, and the Reapers attack. And you manage to somehow get on a shuttle and fly out. And then you spend the rest of the game just sort of meandering around the galaxy trying to build up your forces while the Earth is getting just mauled by Reapers. And it's just, it's a very, like, discordant tonality. It's like, they kind of support that. They're kind of like, oh, well, the reason we have to do this is blah, 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 blah. And, you know, you won't make a difference just going there, but what kind of soldier would do that? You know, their home world is being destroyed, and they're just off wandering around. It doesn't really make any sense. You know, it feels incorrect for them to do that. It feels incorrect for my character to do that. I really wish it had been more of a case of the Reapers are coming. We've actually gotten that they'll be here in such and such a time. And so you're running around trying to get all the galaxies together in order to form a united front when they arrive. Because it feels cowardly and bad for you not to be on Earth fighting while the Earth is under attack by an alien species. It didn't make you feel heroic. And maybe that's the point, but that's not what Mass Effect's been up to until now. Additionally, another of the problems that Mass Effect 3 has in just its general overview is that I talked about how Mass Effect 1 had a was really, really good about constantly giving you bad decisions. And you know, well, I shouldn't even say bad decisions, but things that didn't make a lot of sense. Things where it was a very, very moral gray area and you had to make a choice. Mass Effect 2 didn't do that as much, but it did a little bit. Mass Effect 3 really only... I mean, it had a few missions like that, but they were just continuations of the same freaking themes that has been going on since Mass Effect 1. So it just felt like a culmination of decisions that you had already made by that point. There were no new challenges in Mass Effect 3. It was like, yeah, there was a great bit where you actually got to go to where the Quarians were attacking the Geth, and you got to sort of affect who would win that war. You know, would one of the races get wiped out? Were you able to achieve peace? Which was cool, super satisfying. I was really glad. It was very fulfilling to get to an end of that storyline. But that's not a Mass Effect 3 storyline. That's just the conclusion of Mass Effect 1 and 2's storyline. More Mass Effect 2's than Mass Effect 1, frankly. And the Mass Effect 3 didn't introduce anything else. It was just every single decision you had to make that had any real import was just a decision you probably had already made once because it came up in Mass Effect 2. It was just like the ultimate payoff and the conclusion of that. So I didn't find myself intellectually engaged by Mass Effect 3. And that's bad, because that makes it feel more like a shooter, and I don't like shooters. Mass Effect 3 also had a very, very, very big issue with... It was a much shorter game than the other ones, and it was like that because they put a lot of extra work into scenes. They would have a lot of things that would change based on your past decisions, which was cool. But the changes weren't obvious. It was like, they kind of half-assed it. On the one hand, you've got the fact that, almost every significant scene, depending on who was alive and who was dead, would have different storylines. But the stuff that actually should have mattered, the actual payoffs of what you've done before, oh hey, the Rachni are going to help you because you didn't destroy them before. You just sort of get a little email that says, yeah, the Rachni are here, and people were scared. It was like the real big payoffs that should make you feel really good don't, because it doesn't feel realistic. It doesn't feel actual. Most of it's just an extra voice line here and there. And so it's a much shorter game, but the justification for it being shorter just feels kind of dull, It's like, oh, well, yeah, it's shorter because they had to record an extra voice line. And that's just, it's very frustrating for it to be that way. Characters, Mass Effect 3, they do a really good job with the Mass Effect 2 cast. Again, jumping back for those who haven't played it, Mass Effect 2 has the possibility for every single member of your team to die in the final mission. And because of that, none of the Mass Effect 2 characters will rejoin you in Mass Effect 3, which makes sense. They're doing so much work, they can't put a huge amount of effort into, say, having Jack, be a playable character in all these missions and all of her responses when Jack might be dead for you. And I understand why they did that. But they still let all the characters come back. They show up somewhere in the game. And that's cool. I like that. I really appreciate that. However, the problem with that is that it ends up being that all of your characters are just a retread of Mass Effect 1, except for one guy. They introduced one freaking new character in Mass Effect 3, and I hated him. I found him obnoxious, I found him overdone, I did not like this character, and so for characterization, I was deeply disappointed by Mass Effect 3. I thought they did a really good job with the Mass Effect 2 cast, but then all the Mass Effect 1 cast came back and rejoined me, so it was just like a gang's all here moment. And then the end of the game. The end of Mass Effect 3 is just bad. You go through all of this effort, and you get all of these, forces together, and you stage this massive attack on Earth, and you don't get to see any of it. It's like, you get this you go down onto Earth in order to, help lead an assault on a warp gate, so that you can get up to the location where the, enemy leader is, in order to disrupt this Reaper signal to give your fleets a chance. You don't actually see the battle that you've spent the entire freaking game building forces for. You get a couple of, radio comm messages, and then at the very end, you know how in Deus Ex everyone got mad, in Deus Ex Human Revolution everyone got mad that the end of the game boiled down to a decision you made at the last second? That's kind of the same way Mass Effect 3 ends. Everything you've decided up until the very end of the game is kind of rendered meaningless. At the very end of the game, you have three decisions. You have three choices. You can either choose to take over the Reapers yourself and use them as sort of like intergalactic peacekeepers, Or you can choose to... the big problem is the Reapers aren't able to deal with the fact that organic species are chaos incarnate, and that we don't, do everything uniformly. And so they keep wiping us out, because once we get to a certain level of power and influence, they're like, well, I don't know what they're going to do. They could ruin everything, so we'll just kill them. Or, so, you could either basically take over the Reapers yourself, so they stop doing that, or you can, forcibly change all the species into, like, machine organic hybrids in order to take away free will. Or, what is the third option? Or you can destroy all of the Reapers. But it's like, no matter what you do, you end up, like, fundamentally undoing... I think they fixed this in one of the later things. It's like, a lot of the endings, you end up destroying the mass relays. And so it's like, oh, cool, you got the Quarians and the Geth to get along. Too bad all the Quarians are at Earth and I just took out the mass relay. It's bad. It's bad. And it really sours the Mass Effect experience for me. It ends up... The ending of the third game just kind of makes obsolete almost all your other decisions, because it fundamentally changes the status quo so much that all the stuff that you've changed up until now ends up having to be rewritten anyway. So, it's at the end of Dragon Age Inquisition, or Dragon Age Origins, they handle the end of that game so well, because you'll end up... The fundamental ending is that you can choose whether to die or not in the last battle. But then they'll go through and they will show, okay, here's what the dwarves are doing as a reaction to what you did. Here's what this group is doing as a reaction to what you did. Here's what this group is doing as a reaction to what you did. In this one, you see the change that you made going out across the galaxy, and a couple of still shots of your various people doing various things with no context. A couple of them you can kind of see what happened, and that's something they even added to the extended release. Originally, you didn't even get that. So, as you can tell, Mass Effect 3 is my least favorite Mass Effect, and it really does a disservice to the series. I understand all of the outrage that came with it. Mass Effect 2 is probably my favorite of the series, just because it felt the best to play and it was the most polished. But it's close between Mass Effect 1. Mass Effect 1, like I said, has a better plot. But Mass Effect 2, oh my gosh, I'm just so in love with the suicide mission. But I know I just read... The end result is Mass Effect series, you should play it. At least the first two games. 3 does not handle itself very well, and I'm tentatively worried about Andromeda, because I know a lot of the Mass Effect developers quit during Andromeda's development, which is usually not a good sign. But that's where we stand. That is my retrospective. I know I didn't really... what could Mass Effect have done better? Stay true to Mass Effect 1. Mass Effect 2 did a really good job. Mass Effect 3 just screwed the pooch. Mass Effect 3 just tried to be a generic shooter game in order to, again, expand and try and bring more fans into the series. Mass Effect 2 did that really well. Mass Effect 3 just betrayed the series in order to make it more acceptable, and now everyone hates it. Don't do that, Mass Effect. That's dumb. So, anyway, that'll be just about it. I realized I didn't really come into any conclusions. This is one of the reasons that the game is such a good game, and I'm so excited to play it. And I'm so in love with the universe, and so betrayed by the way it ended. So, I guess that's the good thing about Andromeda, is making the end not be the end, because the end just sours the whole experience to a certain degree. Okay, kitty, I'll feed you. See you next time, guys. Thanks very much for being here. I know the art is... it's weird enough, this art actually looks worse than what I usually draw. And I think it's because I just tried to do it live and actually record the whole thing, and it just... You know what? I'm still having fun with it, and that's what matters.